All right. Well, hello, hello. See, a few people are here. Um, Thanks for joining me tonight. My name is Christian Thomas. I'm just going to do a quick, well, maybe not so quick, walkthrough of a mix from Mix Competition. Lewitt Audio is a microphone manufacturer, and a lot of different companies do this kind of stuff where they'll throw out a bunch of tracks they record, um, and you get to mix it and submit and see what they think and win some cool stuff. I like the way this one turned out, so I just figured I'd try something new and go ahead and live stream how I did it. I'm not the best, I'm not the worst. I'm basically an amateur mixer who got into it for mixing my own stuff. I like to record music myself, and I was just always curious as to how it could all come together, and why my stuff always sounded so bad. So it put me down the rabbit hole, and it kind of turned into like a much bigger hobby than my actual songwriting and music making. So anyway, we'll get going here. The first, we'll kind of step through a few different things. The first thing I want to do is just kind of walk through the process of how I typically start. Process for people is very subjective. It just depends on how you like to work. A lot of this stuff is made up. I think some of the most useful stuff that's happened to me is seeing other people's process and being intrigued by it, and at that point I know it might be something worth incorporating into mine. So anyway, I start with just all the tracks. I went ahead and just mixed them down to a single left-right stem, totally unmixed, just as recorded. So we're going to listen to that real quick. Let's see here. There we go. So we're just going to solo the unmixed version, and we'll start at the beginning, and I'll shut up. I'll just play it.
Could you tell me what does it need to be free? Oh, I can see people are blinded by their anxieties. Prisoners of hate, oh, the slaves of major insecurities. You will reap what you sow, oh, the seeds of your sorrow. You can deny it, you pretend and you hide it.
Intoxication caused by the venom you're spitting. It ain't true just because it's written.
You can deny it, you pretend and you hide it.
Compassion and love need to appear. Detone temptation of anger and fear. Intoxication caused by the venom you're spitting. It ain't true just because it's written.
I hit you, bridges in your heart.
Compassion and love need to appear. The eternal temptation of anger and fear.
All right. So that is the basic form of the song. Like I said, it's unmixed. I mean, it's hard to. Sometimes I think it's hard, especially if you've kind of dabbled in mixing, to um, really get a lay of the land before you start twiddling with things because you're just like, oh, I hear some cool sounds here and there. Let me go. Um, but um, I've just learned personally, it's good to just sit with the whole song all the way through, take notes, maybe do that a few times. It will save you hours later of chasing, the wrong vibe or something like that. Um, so yeah, so that is, the arrangement is nice, nice and tight. It's this nice melodic track. It's got a little spoken word in it. It's a typical rhythm section. The one thing that stood out to me with this song, listening to it, is the keys, because I'm used to stuff that has this kind of an edge, being a little more guitar driven. So guitars are easy to mix for me because I'm a guitar player, and well, I shouldn't say easy, but it's a little more intuitive. Keys, it's when something's very keys driven, I'm a little out of my depth. So I try to listen to other stuff and see, maybe pick out a piano driven song that's rock or funk or something like that and see how it goes. Anyway, so that kind of leads me to my first point. We do a vibe check and just get some ideas going. What do I hear? What am I hearing? And I have here for my vibe check, I have keep notes in Logic here. This is Logic Pro or X or whatever it is. I have Alabama Shakes and Jack White kind of energy to me. It's not that sound because those are very guitar-driven bands, but kind of the slightly overdriven, kind of fierce. Those are kind of extremes to this song. The difference being her vocals are very pristine. The keys are very clean, very pristine. Everything's just kind of very shiny, and those ultimately, don't end up that way. So, but it's at least a direction. So you start going like that. Thinking about the guitar tones. Where can they start going? There's one that's a little jazzier and kind of snazzy. That's doing arpeggios. There's one that's like a searing kind of lead sound that's very tight, highly overdriven or distorted, I guess. And to me, that sounded a little more like a Brian May kind of thing. It's really, there are 1,000 different ways to take it, but you just start kind of from your experience picking up on things that you've heard before and things that slotted well together and made sense together. As far as the drums and the bass, the bass is, I didn't really have any thoughts about it other than it's a bass. He's doing his job. Same thing with the drums, although the drums are a little busier on the ride than some older, kind of more classic stuff, the throwback stuff. They don't necessarily, the kit doesn't necessarily have like a super vintage sound to me. It sounds pretty modern, but I just have this feeling that they're going for a bit more of a throwback sound. So anyway, that kind of I guess ultimately, you start running with something like that and picking it apart, and the song could have a lot more elements to it than that, but it's really all I've got. I've got drums, bass, guitars, vocals, a weird little effect thing that comes in halfway through the song, and then there is kind of an electronic drum loop type thing near the beginning when the drums aren't in, and that's totally electronic. Again, how do you want to start making sense of that? Very R&B, or not. But anyway, I kind of just took the song overall to kind of have a fierceness with it. I mean, obviously the spoken word part, she's really spitting hard, and um, it's kind of got this like prophetic feel. Like I'm going to tell you what's going to happen to you. I'm gonna told you so at some point. It's kind of angry but purposeful. So that's what I had for my notes for that. It's kind of cheesy, but again, you kind of put stuff down in your own way, and your own feelings when you first listen to it. Um, so then, kind of the next thing I move on to is edit check. Does anything need to be edited? Um, you know, are there? Well, you don't need to over edit mouth sounds. That's one of my biggest pet peeves. Is like little clicky mouth noises. Like you need a glass of water, and I can hear everything about. Probably I'm doing it a little bit right now, but um, those don't always have to get edited out with high precision because the vocals are in a mix. So I try not to go too zealous with it. And thankfully, every one of these tracks was edited well. And the rhythm is tight. That's the next thing you want to check for in editing. And I really want to sit on this for a minute. Too many times I was doing a mix and it had no vibe. It had no groove. It had no feel to it. The emotion was gone. And I would sit there and try to compensate for it with the mix. Maybe I need more compression. Maybe I need more EQ. Maybe I need less compression. It needs to be dynamic. Maybe the effects aren't right. Like just something doesn't feel right. Well, of course it doesn't feel right. They're not playing together. If the rhythm is really sloppy and all over the place, the emotional impact of the song to me is gone by 50%. If you're not intentional, if it's all just showing up at random times, there's good sloppy. There's like chilled, laid back sloppy sitting in the pocket as a feel, and that's right. But then there's just sloppy, like, hey, you kind of didn't know your part and you recorded it, and maybe it was a rush job. Who knows? And you never want to like put that on the artist as somebody who wasn't doing a good job. You just I gotta tighten this up. So that requires you to get really familiar with whatever DAW you're working in, the editor. I work in Logic all the time. I'm kind of fast in it. I have a friend who works in Pro Tools, who is a machine. I mean, he can edit 50 tracks down, in 15 minutes to something completely tight and amazing. And when I say tight, I mean, literally just moving little chunks of the track around left and right, getting everything to line up. And if somebody's behind or if the bass isn't quite there, playing in time, to edit those notes. You can do that in any major DAW at this point. There's all kinds of stuff. And the next thing you want to go to is vocal tuning. And this is where people can get a little sensitive or not. Where if the vocalist is out of key, you're going to want to tune it a little bit. Auto-tune, the T-Pain effect is, you can do it really subtly or you can do it really strong. And then there are also manual editors where maybe there's just one little note out of place. You can just edit that one note and slot it right back into the right pitch. So, but those things is so important. It's tedious, it's boring, it's not sexy, but a well edited session will make your mixing life so easy. And again, thankfully the tracks they gave us, nicely edited. Everybody was playing tight. They were cleaned up. There wasn't any random noise or hums or things like that. I did open the vocal track up in this program called Isotope RX, and it's a audio. It's kind of a fixer. It's this really cool way of spot cleaning incredibly narrow selections of a sound form with in a certain time frame and frequency range. So you can take out little mouth clicks. You can just see them. It looks like a heat map. And in the beginning of the song, when it was very sparse, that's where I had to make those edits because I could hear them and they bothered me. And I know if they bother me, they'll probably bother someone else. So that's kind of editing. Get that stuff out of the way. Get it over with. It's tedious, but it will make the track. I mean, if you listen to every major high energy pop track or Even indie rock stuff is always edited really well. And the pop stuff, I mean, to have that amount of energy, almost just bursting with energy, that stuff is tight. I mean, it's all hitting at the exact same time. So, okay, so there's that. So there's editing. Um, Now, let's pretend I've kind of gotten all my edits out of the way. I'm gonna go ahead and start importing the tracks. So they just give us, a whole a whole folder of WAV files. And then I have a template, and I'll show you all the template here. Um, let's see. So basically, I split everything up into these stacks here. Here's the vocal wave that they gave us. This is these are auxiliary tracks. I'll talk about those later. Keys. So we got the main and the additional keys. Guitars. I always kind of go Vox, mids, and then bass and drums. I don't know why, but that's just the way my brain works. So bass down here, drum kit, and then you can see I've got everything up under here. Some people don't work with these kind of track stack or folder type ideas, but I love the organization and I love how easy it is to bust stuff out. So you can see all this stuff under the drum kit, and then the percussion, which is the little drum loop and some mallet percussion. So that's, I'll kind of just divide stuff up by purpose. And again, it kind of makes, like, if you just want to mix these as a group, it makes it so much easier to automate that. Automate some of the groups here. Anyway, so I kind of lay that out in my template, and then this is something that's kind of unique to me, but I'll talk about it because you can get maybe a little inspired by it in your own way. I got inspired by a article with Michael Brower. He's got this crazy bus-based mixing system that he invented and has been iterating on for many, many years. And he lays it out and diagrams it, and I don't have the equipment to copy him, but the idea of, he'll separate out a vocal bus, a backup vocal bus, mids or guitars, I think, and low end, and kind of process, obviously, tracks together, but also do a lot of bus-based processing. And when I say bus, I mean that's basically just it's a grouping of individual tracks. I'll show you my buses here. Let's see. I have these, so the vocals here are going out to my mixer bus 1. I always reserve bus 2 for the mids. So the vocals on the vocal bus, I have 2 processors, and this is starting to go in the analog world. I'll show you real quick. Let's flip through some of my equipment just so I don't have to make you wonder. So here we go. So here's my mixer. Can everybody see that? Let me just make sure it's showing up here. Yay. Okay, so here's my mixer. You can see the far left, and nothing's labeled, of course. I mean, I memorized this. It's left and right vocals. Next to that would be left and right mids, and then drums and bass. And then the last bus there is reserved for parallel compression on the mids. And you can see up at the top of the mixer, I have all those inserts, and those are all going to analog gear, and that's where this gets fun. So in digital recording, you can process stuff what they call in the box, and that means digitally with plugins, and you can stay there. I kind of like to get the best of both worlds, and do a little in the box, a little out of the box. So I take all of my tracks in Logic, and go ahead and send them into at least 4 buses into this mixer here. And then I can have a little control. I can start getting kind of weird with it. On the vocal bus, I have this, let's see. There we go. The vocal bus has this nail compressor, which is a tube hybrid compressor with a wet dry blend. You can do parallel compression with it, and then this SK note. It's like a high kind of an air EQ. It's ultra high frequencies. It's got some nice transformers in it. I tend to like to add it after compression because if there's one thing some compressors can do, it's be a little mean with the high frequencies that are real silky and delicate. They'll squash them down sometimes. It just depends on what you're doing with it. And I kind of like to reinflate it, if that makes sense, with this Air EQ. It's very similar. You can get a similar effect with some vintage EQs in Logic that are the Pultec clones, or like a Universal Audio Pultec. This is only the high end of it. Going back to the mixer here. So that's on the vocal bus. On the mids bus, these are all my dirty secrets. Here's my rack. At the very top, I have an Aphex Aural Exciter, which is kind of this harmonic distortion. You pick a frequency band and it kind of excites it. And they're real cheesy effects. They kind of overhype things a little bit. People like to use them on vocals. I kind of like to throw my mids bus into it sometimes, just to give it a little sparkle and a little saturation up in some upper mid frequencies. Kind of silly. I don't use it on every time, but that's where I get going with that. Going back to the mixer. So that's the only thing on the mids bus right now. And the third bus, which is drums and bass, has a really fun device on it. This Loop Trotter Saturate. It's the second rack item down, yellow. It's an overdrive. And the cool thing about this overdrive is well, let me back up. If you want to add a little saturation to something, you can get kind of almost a tapey vibe, like it sounds recording to tape. Not entirely, but a little bit of that vibe. And you can kind of, it almost acts as a little dynamic control for higher frequencies. The problem is if you want to send stuff that's like more of a full mix or drums and bass to it, in an overdrive pedal like used for a guitar, the low frequencies will overwhelm that circuit first because they're super high energy. And so it'll get real farty sounding really fast. So this device has basically a switch that says, hey, treat low frequency content differently. Let the higher frequency stuff saturate this and start to overdrive it. So I really love it on drums and bass. And again, I don't use it on everything, but I did use it on this session. Okay. Go back to the mixer. All right, and lastly, that last bus, right? So the masters in the middle, those two white faders. To the left of that last bus is a Drummer compressor, which I'll pull back up over here. It is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down. 2 little VU meters there, bright yellow. It's a bus compressor, kind of styled after an 1176 ish, and it has a saturation knob, which is fun to play with. But I use this for my mids bus, and I'll explain that in a second. Well, I'll explain it now. So one of the things I like to do, and this is some other mix engineers I've read about have done this, is they take some tracks from the mids, not the low end, just the mids, above where the drums and bass usually sit. And they send them to a compressor and really kind of smack the shit out of it and over compress it and make it really exciting and kind of crazy sounding. And then they'll slowly bring that in with the rest of the mix to kind of give it that missing excitement, missing middle. And the value and the virtue of parallel compressing is that you do get, parallel compressing is when you have the uncompressed signal, which has all the transients intact, with the compressed signal. And so with the uncompressed signal still in there, you still get a little bit of those pleasing transients that to the human ear make it sound alive. Not totally squashed and dead. And I think that's one of the first mistakes everybody makes, and I still make, is, reaching for a compressor because you think it's going to make it sound cool, or you think you should, or whatever, and just destroying all the transient information in there, whether it's the, attack of the, the bass. Maybe it's an acoustic bass, and you're just ruining the player's touch with that compressor, and totally sending it to the to nowhere, to purgatory. Or keys. They get real kind of snappy and plasticky sounding real fast. So again, parallel compression is kind of your friend. I will give you guys a quick audio tour of the mix parallel compression real quick. So let me go back to the Logic. Okay, so here is, and I mix with it on all the time, so it's always on. So you have to keep in mind, if you're going to start with all this bus-based stuff, keep it on. Don't add it later, because it's like bringing a stranger into your house. You kind of ruin the vibe, and you're going to confuse yourself. So I always mix with it on, and so when I take it out, it will sound very drastic, but it's kind of an assumption that I like to have. I like to have these same settings on a lot of the stuff. So so let's see. Here is my mix. There's the parallel compression I just took out.
Could you tell me
It's going to come back in.
what does it need to be free?
Skip ahead a little bit.
You can deny it, you preach it in your heart.
Okay, it's out.
Intoxication caused by the venom you're spitting. It ain't true just because it's written.
Now it's back in.
You can deny it, you preach it in your heart.
Anyway, the difference is kind of subtle sometimes, but for me, it made it nice. It kind of filled it out and gave it some body. But I don't start with no body and then kind of pull it in. It's just always on. It's like a good friend, and you can work differently. I just like to keep it on. So yeah, so let's take a break. Oh, and I guess we'll talk about the master bus really quick. So, so on my mixer here at the very top, I have a master bus insert, so I can put some master bus processing on. Which, if you work in the box, you're familiar with it too. It's just the left and the right channel and some effects you're going to apply to the overall mix. What I will do with that is typically gets sent through this Chameleon Labs. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down under that big silvery thing. And that has kind of an SSL vibe to it, and a parallel compression option. So you can blend 50% compressed signal and 50% uncompressed signal, or tweak that wherever you want it. And I just think it's a really nice compressor, and I think it has some nice transformers in it that tend to saturate. So so that is first on the bus, and then let's see, these little purple, the name is just really off-putting. They're called little PEQRs. It's kind of schoolyard, but they're the two big black knobs there, and it's a little bit like a Pultec style EQ minus the tubes. And on the master, what that means for me is it's a little bit of air, a little bit of those ultra high frequencies, and then the low end, I like the way it brings up low end. So if I have something that maybe just needs a little push in the low end, which this, at the end of it, I finally did kind of add a little low end. I like to use these. They also have nice transformers in them, and they sound good. It doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be analog. You figure out what you want on your master bus, but just be consistent either way. Either have something on the master bus all the time that you're working through, or don't. And there's no wrong answer there. This is just the way I like to work. It's just that if you don't have any processing there, and then you're like, cool, well, I gotta make it sound like it's all big and radio ready and mastered, and then you add all that stuff later, it's gonna start bringing some really wonky stuff out of your mix most of the time. Then it's very frustrating to kind of go back and redo things. So I always have it on. There we go. So that's kind of the bus routing of how all this stuff has gone. So we'll take a quick break before we move on to track processing and how I process the tracks. If anybody has any questions at any time, yeah, little purples. Thanks, Johnny. Everybody give it up for Johnny. He's had a rough week. He's here though. And yeah, post your questions if you have any, or if you think something's dumb, or if you're perturbed, or excited. All the emotions. The only bummer about this whole live stream thing is it's just a one-sided conversation. And then you laugh at yourself and sound like a maniac. But no, I kind of like Zoom and things like that where you can see people and they can kind of ask questions. But live streams are live streams. It's fun to be anonymous. Hey, let's say that. There we go. So we'll get going here on the track processing then. But like I said, post your questions if you have them. All right, so let's get back to Logic. All right. So we'll just start down the line. We'll start with Vox, which is vocals. And so this is the bus here. And then on the lead vocal, this is the lead vocal. I have a little high pass going on. A little dip here. The proximity effect could get a little much on her vocal for me. And then a little bump here. This is Logic's stock EQ. Let me make sure that it's actually showing up in OBS. Oh no, it's not. Oh, what a bunch of garbage. You know what? Let me see if I can share my screen really quick. Oh, let's see. Hang on just a second. Bear with me. I didn't know it was not going to show the plugins. Properties. Gotta love OBS. Windows Server Desktop. Can it do it? No, it cannot do it. Oh man. Let's see. It's always the one thing you don't think of. Hey, will this show a plugin? All right, let me see if it pops up in the window as something I can share. This is gonna be so fun. Okay, vocal LCT. And then we'll just say we'll add a new source. Display capture. Hey, let's just do display capture. Hey, thanks everybody. Thanks for bearing with me. We're gonna do display capture. So let's start with that. Whoa, Inception. I love it. This is great. All right, I'm going to just minimize this and trust that you can see what I'm seeing. You guys good on that? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, you'll see what I see. So we have this, so we're on the vocals. Little 300 taken out, well, 290 to be specific, and this little bump. This is Logic's stock EQ. I love it. It's great. I don't feel like I need to pay for FabFilter. It is awesome. And then the next thing we have is this Comp 3A, this is a cool feature in Logic, and I won't harp on it too much. But this is another way to send stuff from Logic to analog hardware, but make it like a plugin. So pull up the rack here. This is the Comp 3A. And so basically that little plugin I just showed you is Logic sending signal to that and bringing it back in and adjusting for latency. So, hey, that's fun. So yeah, so that's what that does. So it's like a LA3A, and it's an opto compressor. I like the way it treats vocals. Not every vocal. Sometimes it adds a little harshness to me. It depends on. Well, actually, let me give you a little kind of thought that I have when processing vocals. Someone with a voice like mine that is very, well, I wouldn't say unique, but not poppy and not strong, not silky or smooth or huge. You have to be careful with vocal processing because it can take what's unique about a singer's voice and just make it horrific. Versus if you take somebody with a very formal, wonderful, lovely, kind of more of a trained voice even, I found that you can send them through a lot. You have a lot more options to you, and they don't necessarily sound bad. They just all sound different. So I have put this compressor on some people's vocals that I've mixed before, and they are maybe a little more, have a unique voice with maybe more nasal like mine, and it just sounds awful. It just accentuates all the wrong stuff. So anyway, for her, I thought it sounded good. It started kind of evening it out because she's a very dynamic singer. She had good mic control in that she was getting close to the mic, and then she'd get really far away when she was loud. But still, it was a very dynamic performance. And you want to keep that level of, that kind of level of dynamics, but you don't want it to sound like you're zooming in and out all the time. So this guy is starting in to compress. It doesn't have a very heavy setting on it. And the next thing that it will go to is the Fat Lady. I apologize for the name. That's just what the guy who invented it named it. So, so I'll show you that. Fat Lady is a tube compressor. It's that big silvery looking thing. You can tell that somebody with a crazy brain made it, who's a mad genius. And it's a tube compressor. I think he said it was based on some kind of old Philips design. And that is actually doing a lot of work because it sounds so good and it's pretty transparent. And it has some tubes in it, which to me always add a little sparkle, a little dimensionality. But again, I have to be careful with that kind of stuff depending on the type of voice because it can quickly sparkle on the wrong frequencies and make it sound really, really obnoxious. So again, on her vocal, she's a strong singer. She has a nice voice. So it sounds great, I thought it sounded good. The cool thing, about this kind of setup that's fun for me is that I can audition different pieces of hardware with the click of a button. So like if I want to do some other device that I have in my rack here, I just click that and see how it sounds. It really beats patching stuff in and out. So that's it for the vocals. It's really just a little simple EQ. And then going into the real world to an opto compressor and then the tube compressor, the Verimute compressor it is. And then these all are different effects buses. And so I'll play the vocals. Let's see here. So we can play.
Could you tell me?
So that's nothing. Let's just take all this off.
What does it need to be free?
So we can add the compression and the EQ back in.
Could you tell me?
Immediately you can hear it gets a lot breathier and in your face. And to me that's fine. I mean, there's some songs that need to sound more natural. There's some songs that sound good with really kind of uber compressed vocals. And I like the way they sounded more compressed. The first bus, let's see what this bus is. The BDD 320. This is a very cool device. Let me solo it for you. It's a chorus, and this is in the real world. It does this. Wow, it's a chorus, and it's got all kinds of cool, crazy delays on it. It's a Clark
to
Technic.
be free.
It's fun. I like analog effects. I thought it sounded cool. Here's her regular vocal blended in.
I can see people are.
Okay, so there's that. Because what I wanted to do, what I like about that chorus is that it thickens somebody's voice without necessarily adding a lot more loudness to it, to me. So it doesn't tend to make it poke out of a mix. It just kind of fills out the sides, which I like. And so the next bus that our effects are going to, and this again is going into the real world, into this, this is a classic cool thing. I'll just show you guys. Rack. So the big, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the big black strip, that was the chorus. And then right below that is the Korg SDD 2000, which is a analog delay. And there's another model that the Edge from YouTube made famous. That's just like everybody has to have because it's got this crazy preamp in it. This is the model without the preamp, and you can still find it pretty cheap online because it's just, it's not the right one. So I love it. It's got the coolest analog delay sound to me when I want to think about that. There's a plug-in version of it. There's a lot of plug-in versions of it. So you find what works for you. But I thought, and this is where we start really thinking about the intent of the song and the tightness of the song, because I've heard some other submissions that use a lot of reverb. And one thing reverb does is it removes whatever you put it on. It starts to push it towards the background. It starts to kind of fuzz the edges of it a little bit, and rhythmically, it hangs over everything. So, if you've got a song like this where the arrangement's really tight and everybody's got hits together, you don't want to hear a reverb hanging, trailing off, decaying while this band is really doing this kind of cool acrobatic stuff. It's just, to me, it feels sloppy. So I went with kind of a short slap kind of delay.
Eyes of hate, oh, the slaves of major insecurities.
It sounds like a lot soloed, but in the mix, you can still hear it. It's not as much. Okay, and then I have this really bad idea here, which we can talk about later, and then phrase distortion. So on the spoken word part.
If you breathe it, then you hide it. Intoxication caused by the venom you're spitting. It ain't true just because it's written. You cannot deny it. You breathe it, and you hide it. Compassion and love need to appear. Detone temptation of anger and fear.
So that right there, actually, I want to talk about for a minute. What's going on there is these buses these effects coming in and out. So for the kind of chorus / spoken word part, for the first phrase, it's this overdrive.
If you breathe it, then you hide it.
Sorry, there we go. Which I thought sounded just super cool.
You can deny it.
It's just really, really fierce. And that's where, maybe going back earlier to the vibe, I'm like, well, I love the way all the White Stripes, Jack White stuff sounds, and his vocal is just everything in that is overdriven to crap, and it sounds amazing. So there's that on the first phrase, and then if you'll notice, the delay isn't there because we want this rhythmic tightness to it. So in the automation for that delay, I have it ducked down. So, because again, the whole band, let's just play the whole band there for a minute.
You can deny it. You breathe it, and you hide it. Intoxication caused by the venom you're spitting. It ain't true just because it's written. You cannot deny it. You breathe it, and you hide it. Compassion and love need to appear. Detone temptation of anger and fear.
So yeah, you can, it's these kind of different effects buses coming in and out to keep the rhythm there, to keep the tightness there, but also still give it these collars. in earlier days in my life, I would just leave those things on all the time and kind of wonder why it sounds sloppy. Um, it's to me it was oh man, I gotta automate every little thing. It's like, well, yeah, you kind of do, but it's really easy now because it's all digital. So shut up and do it. Um, so yeah, so that's pretty much it for the vocals. They don't do a lot more from there. I had this really bad idea, which I'll play for you guys real quick. Let's see. Let me just make sure it's unmuted. Here we go. Octave down drive. I wanted to make it angry.
You can deny it, you preach it, and you hide it. Intoxication caused by the venom you're spitting. It ain't true just because it's written.
I don't know if you can hear that, but that's basically just.
You can't. It ain't true just because it's written.
Oh, let's set it back in here. Sorry.
It ain't true just because it's written.
I thought the octave down would sound really cool. And I spent all this time like kind of obsessing over it and making it, this really cool effect. It sounds really bad. So that's kind of a good example of the time when, you gotta go down the rabbit hole and you come back up and you walk away for a minute and come back and realize it stinks really bad. So that's, obviously muted for the rest of the, it's not in there for real. Okay. Thanks for bearing with me. We'll go ahead and move on to keys. So, one of the things that, when you get all these tracks and you get all set up, you get it into your template or whatever it is, where do you start? Do you start with drums and bass? Do you start with vocals, whatever? To me, the drums and bass of this song sounded unremarkable and not in a bad way. They just are what they are. They're just kind of doing their thing. The fact that keys were used was very different to me to drive this kind of a song, and not like maybe even a Rhodes sound or something like that, something a little crunchier. But this really, really clean, hyper clean piano sound. And the vocals. She's obviously got a very, flavorful voice. So I thought if anything was going to set the groove and the tone of the song, it was actually going to kind of come from the keys and the vocals. So that's where I started with this one. I started with keys and vocals. I let the drums and bass just hang out forever before I even touched them. So I'll play the keys. Let's see. So here's nothing. So you can hear, apart from that little nice delay there, it sounds like a keyboard, and it is a keyboard. It's a keyboard that went directly into a recording session. So for the main keys, I have this Fairchild tube compressor plug-in. You can see it's doing a good bit of work. But I like the way it sounds. And I kind of like this one on keys and guitars all the time. Or acoustic guitars, I mean. And then we added a little Pultec action. Boosting around 8K, pretty wide. And taking down around 100 there. Got a little 1.5. Or I guess, no, a 200 dip. But just kind of some finishing touches, and I didn't feel like it needed much more than that. The thing for me with direct recorded keyboards is, they vary with sample qualities. It sounds like a good sample to me, but it's lacking something that every real recorded piano has. And it's just weird. It doesn't come out from a keyboard to me. But space, it needs space. It needs to vibrate air. The body of the piano vibrates an entire room. So we are sending it off to this keys verb, which, let's see, where is keys verb? Oh, I moved it over here. It's a space modulator, which is Valhalla, really cool thing. And then into the Valhalla room, which is kind of more the reverb, and then a compressor. I like to compress reverbs like this sometimes. to kind of keep it tight again, this idea of keeping it tight, where like, when they're really, really hammering on it, you don't want that to all, the reverb to kind of respond the same way. I kind of like the reverb to come back in to fill out when it gets quiet, so to kind of rush back in when the dynamics go down. And that's a trick my brother taught me, actually, where you can do it like that, or you can side chain it to another element in your mix where you say, okay, when this other track is hitting really hard, squash my reverb down, just bury it, with this compressor. And then when that element in the mix is gone, go ahead and let that reverb flood back in. So it's kind of going back more towards the the rhythmic element of a mix. I like to do that because it kind of keeps it tight. So we have this. So now we're adding space back into the keys, and it doesn't sound like a real piano to me, but it sounds like a thing. It doesn't sound like a keyboard. I mean, it sounds like a keyboard with a lot of reverb, I guess.
Oh, I'm blinded by their.
I like the way the reverb, especially in the beginning, kind of fills things out because it is very sparse at the beginning. Let's see. Here's a fun thing. Sorry, I had it muted. I don't know if you can hear that, but so let me backpedal on the thought here. One of the nice things to do for any mix without being too wacky and without making it, taking super hardcore producer. I mean, it's a fine line between being a mix engineer and a producer, and you don't want to overstep your boundaries. You don't want to do something, totally whack something up that the band with a real producer had done that was really nice. But that said, when you come to a new part of the song, I like to introduce something a little new, a little different, something to keep the mix feeling fresh, feeling different in the arrangement, but not necessarily influencing it too much. And so during those kind of hammered phrases there, it adds this keys distortion in, which is a guitar amp and a Leslie rotor type thing. These are all just Logic plugins. And this weird plugin called Sketch Cassette, which is it's like a cassette tape emulator. It kind of softens and blurs everything up. And then another EQ. I kind of do some crazy filtering, because again, you're blending in this effect with the actual other signal. You don't want too much of the original signal in there. It just sounds like you're doubling things up, and it's unnecessary. So. So that comes in just for that part, and I just felt like it gave it a crunch. You can listen to it in context here. It was really pleasing to me.
You can deny it, you preach it, and you hide it.
So there's that. So that's really the keys. The only other part is this cute little doodly-doo. Just that riff, and I thought it sounded fine. It just put a little spring reverb on it from a Space Echo. So, in context.
I'll reach out my hand to make you understand. We gotta stay together.
So that's it. I mean, that's it for the keys. Really wasn't a lot more to it than that. So let's see. We'll keep going. Guitars. We've got 2 guitar elements. Really going on. So what I did, actually, go up here. We'll get rid of you. So here's we'll start with the main rhythm. That's the whale. Great. So that's the really kind of overdriven, distorted, or distortion-y sounding guitar that I thought might sound a little like Brian May. Not a ton, but just kind of that dry, really stinging kind of distortion. So, what do I got here? So it's going to the little compression. kind of not the fastest attack, and pretty fast release. Some EQ here with the Neve, taking off a little bit of the low end. Yeah, just kind of taking out. We don't need a lot of that other information, low frequency, low mids, because the piano and bass are hanging out there. But we don't want it to be too crispy either, so it's a fine balance. And then, going into this room. I like it to sound like the guitar amp is in a room, and it was very, very dry to me. So I'll play the totally dry signal. Okay. Well, actually, I'm missing an element here. There we go. This is totally dry. I did a trick. I did a thing. So we'll add these effects back in, and so you see it's going off the little bus here. Guitar cab. This I like. This was a single mic. It's mono in one guitar amp, and I like doing two mics on a guitar amp. I like doing, two mics and then maybe a room mic further away, just to give you those options to kind of make it sound more 3D or more in your face or whatever you want. So this guitar is getting bussed off to guitar cab bus here, which is panned all the way left. So I got, it's kind of nuts. The guitar is going all the way right. This bus is all the way left. And the bus I just figured it sounded cool with a different amp. And this is just a little cheesy Logic plugin. And I say that kind of half jokingly. It looks cheesy, but it sounds cool to me. It just gives a little width. Just having those two different amp styles together, but panned hard left and right. And you can do that any number of ways. I mean, you can double the track and then process it. I could copy this and process it differently and then do hard left and right. That's it for that kind of main guitar.
You can deny.
One thing I wanted to accentuate, and this is something I'll do if I'm being kind of lazy, is if there's a part that I really want to pop, I'll just double the track, because tracks are free, and add it. Add it in. Because look, you don't have to mix this. It's just right there. You set it and forget it. And it's this wail, which I thought was cool sounding right before the first kind of chorus.
The seeds of your sorrow.
So that. So I just wanted to add a little bit more of it, so I did that, and that's what it did. And the last part of it is really just these little arpeggios. So this one is obviously getting a little more affected. I thought it would sound cool, kind of more of a throwback sound with some spring reverb on it. It's going through kind of some similar stuff, some EQ first this time. Rolling off a little bit of the highs. They were a little harsh to me. Taking care of the low end quite a bit. Really chopping it off. Because again, you don't need a lot of low end in this track. And you don't need it to sound harsh. But you really you're not going to miss it. There's so much other low mids in this track. A little compression to even things out. It's probably not even touching it half the time. Yeah, it's not even touching it. And then this oxide tape plugin, which I really like. Kind of, to me, the instant change is some of the mids come forward. It warms it up. And that's not always a good thing. Again, it depends on the source. If you're working with something with kind of wonky mids already, and it sounds kind of grainy, you don't necessarily need a tape plug-in on it. But I thought everything was so clean, so sparkly clean. I thought this would sound cool, like especially a really low IPS setting where tape is moving slow. Anyway. So that's it for the guitars. Pretty simple. It's I don't think they did too many takes and got too crazy with the arrangement. It was a live band recording their song. All right, let me just check in here. Good. Wow, this has been going on a while. If you're still here, cool. Thank you. This is fun. I think it's fun. So yeah, so there are our guitars. So we'll get on to the rest of the rhythm section. We got the bass. Um, Play a little bit of the bass without anything on it. Boop. And this was a trouble spot for me. So that's totally dry. And it's not doing anything for me. Like literally nothing. It's a mic'd bass amp. It's well mic'd, but I don't know what it is about it. It's not doing anything for me. So the first thing I'm going to send it to is this Chandler Germanium comp, which I'll pull up here. Rack. All right, can you guys see that? Okay, yeah, there we go. So it's this purple thing, three units down from the top. It's a it's a really cool compressor. It gets you really aggressive, really fast, and I like to use it to add meat, kind of some I don't know. It's a punch you in the face kind of compressor. And it can be very very gentle too, very very delicate. But if you want it to punch something in the face, it totally will do that. So let's go into that first. I wanted some punch you in the face because I'm just not feeling it yet. So let's. So now we're getting a little punch here, and we're gonna add in this Little Labs Voice of God. It's like a little bit like a high pass filter, I guess, or with a resonant bump. So where you tend to put the drop off, there's just a little resonant bump at that frequency, or I guess slightly above that frequency. And so it can take out some of the low stuff, but also add like a kind of a pleasing bump. A good example would be like this Howard Stern voice, kind of, where it's this thick, luxurious. You almost hear like an octave down from his actual speaking voice. You can take this plug-in. It's a plug-in, but also, I have the hardware unit. You can take it and throw it on like a podcast or something like that, like a track somebody speaking, and it adds this rich like broadcast quality to their voice, which is why it's called Voice of God. But it works really cool on bass and like synth bass and electronic music with crazy, low percussion and drums and samples and stuff like that. So I'm trying to add a little punch, a little low bump, and then cleaning it up with a little EQ, a little extra EQ here, so we can see what I got. And that started to sound fine to me. And then I added this extra compressor on here that doesn't do anything. Why doesn't it do anything? Well, it's one of those sidechain things where at the beginning where we have the percussion. Let's see. See where that electronic kick hits? It ducks the bass just a little bit because I wanted that kick to take everything in the low end. I didn't want the bass to stomp on it at all. And this compressor only kicks in just for that, so it's off the rest of the track. And in Logic, super fun. You just side chain it to this track here. It does that magically. What a world. So that's the signal chain for the bass. I don't really do
True, just because it's written. You can deny it, you preach it.
I was getting pretty happy with it by then. So the last thing is the drum kit, and this is the most complicated part. This was also the highest trouble area for me. A few things. I think I mix drums differently every time I get a drum kit. Yeah, I just do. That's because every drum kit's different, and they're all recorded pretty different. You can see I don't have a ton of effects on a lot of these tracks here. Let me pull this taller. Boop. There we go. So you got the floor tom, hi-hat, kick, condenser, kick, I guess just a regular dynamic mic. Let me make these tracks a little wider here so we can read the... Did that not do anything? There we go. Let's see. Overheads, rack, whatever. So my problem here. So two problems. The snare. let's talk about the snare. Oh yeah, it's where everything, in a drum set is for me, is the snare. So here's the dry snare. Let's get all these off. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, bum. So that frequency, that ring, that kind of resonance, I did not like that. I did not like that at all. Sometimes you're lucky enough to have drums where that resonance in a drum head, or the shell, is almost maybe like in the key of the song, in the right place, like a fundamental or something like that. And it kind of fits, and you're like, oh, that just sounds great. This tone is not even close to the key of the song for me, and I did not like hearing it. So we started to do a few things to it. First, I take this thing called the Transient Designer. I wanted to take a little edge off the snare because we're thinking throwback. I'm thinking tape. I'm thinking take these really kind of bright, bright drums, really pristine sounding drums, and start to kind of mush them up just a tiny bit. And I say tiny bit. By the end, they're really mushed. So we got the attack here. This is a Transient Designer. It can take the edge off of something, literally. Just take a little off the top. So we can just turn it on. You see just a little boop right there. So I like that. I liked where that was going. So then I took some linear EQ and did some really aggressive, kind of wider notching. This to take out some of the other kit that was coming up through the snare mic. And then this was that resonance that just sounded really nuts to me. So let's... So there it is right there. Woof. Yeah, like, no thanks. Little bump here for some attack. I guess for whatever reason I thought something was harsh there. So that's kind of the snare, and then it started getting there. Now it's not going to work completely, because that overtone is going to be present in the other mics because of bleed. So I kind of did a similar EQ on the snare bottom. It has a snare bottom mic. So they take a mic, put it under the snare, and you reverse the polarity, and then you get this. Did the same thing there. So yeah, so I didn't try to eliminate it all in one source. That was pretty aggressive. Don't get me wrong, pretty aggressive way to take it out. But I wasn't going to go insane making these huge changes just in one or two tracks when you can kind of spread out the changes. And then, it's still kind of anemic sounding to me. This little ba-dunk, ba-dunk. It's just not there yet for me. So I wanted something with some snap. Boom. And then lastly, just a little high stuff going in, and a little duck, low mids, to kind of get this final, kind of beefier snare sound. And again, this isn't your end all be all, because the rest of the kit is picking this up too. So you can't just kind of over focus on one snare track when, like, let's use the overheads for instance, it's in there. But what I found with this kit is that less was more. They had a billion tracks, all cool different options. But, if we're thinking kind of throwback, we're not using that many mics. It's a really dead sound sometimes. It's a bit of a tapey sound sometimes. And not a very reverberant room even. So and this had the room. Let's see if I can find the room real quick. Rack, overheads. Where's that room at? Drum room. Here we go. So there's a little delay on there.
Intoxication
But I really didn't end up using much of that at all. Got some toms coming in. I didn't really do much to them. Well, nothing, literally. Kick, not a lot going on there. So the cool thing about using two different mics for the kick, and I think this is the intent, is that maybe you don't have to go crazy or EQing or compressing one mic to try to get everything out of it. you can kind of blend these mics to taste. So here's the condenser. It's, you know, nice, punchy, kind of, you can hear more of the room. And that's the dynamic mic. It's a little deader, obviously, but it's got more thump. It's got more boom. So between the two, I thought it was a fine kick sound. I didn't feel like I needed to do anything crazy to it. Because again, this isn't, you know, the kick drum doesn't have to be the biggest thing in this mix. It doesn't have to be crazy punchy either. So thought it sounded fine. You know, nice mics. These are all good mics. Overheads, really didn't end up using a lot of them. They didn't sound that amazing to me. And it was not so much, you know, the mics or the way it was recorded. It's just I didn't feel like it needed it. So again, I got kind of the transient designer on here taking off some of the attack. And then a little compression. And I thought that sounded right. It started feeling uniform, but still kind of like the edge was taken off to me. So listen to the whole. Oh, I guess I'll save the best part for last. This worst mic. Worst. I don't know what the intent is here, but my guess, and this is kind of something you have to play detective with sometimes, is it was the, you know, the trash mic that they just throw maybe by the drummer's legs, or, you know, somewhere in front of the kit, like directly in front of the kit. I couldn't really tell, but I liked it. I thought it sounded really warm and cool. So I actually ended up using a ton of it kind of over the overheads to give it some dimensionality. So yeah, so it's getting compressed just a little bit. This is like a Logic SSL clone kind of thing, I guess, with, you know, distortion on clip. So it is pretty hard. You can play without it. Kind of loses the excitement. I wanted to have something really cool to kind of blend in with the rest of the kit. And then this is just some kind of corrective EQ to take out some of the lows we don't need. So yeah, so you blend that back in.
Compassion and love need.
To me, it added a lot, so I'm really thankful for that little mic. All right, let me check on y'all, see how we're doing. All right, doing okay. So that's drums. Yeah, that's it. I mean, you know, we're talking percussion at this point. We're getting down to the end here. So they have these mallet swells. Let's see. So I do have a little compression on that. Just to keep it from being too in your face. You know, but also, you know, to keep it like you do, it is a transition. It's a tool that they're using to transition into like another phrase, another section. So it is important to keep there. You don't want to bury it, but you also don't want it to go out of control. So compression there, and then lastly, kind of the drum loop. And this one has a lot going on. A lot of compression. I got some EQ, taking out some of the really low stuff, kind of bringing in some of the squanchy mids. I call them squanchy. So bringing those mids in. The Sketch cassette plugin that we talked about earlier sounds like a cassette. Anytime I hear drums like this, I think lo-fi immediately. It's just kind of my bent. So I start going lo-fi, and hopefully not, you know, too crazy that somebody hates it, but whatever. Little 4K boosted. And then we got this tube preamp. I like the way these sound. I think they're cool. And just to take, actually used. They have an EQ on it, very basic one. I ended up taking out just a little bit of the 4.5K range here. I don't know. I think Tube stuff does really cool stuff with lows, with percussion in general. So I don't know. I don't have a really great reason for why that's on there. And then again, this kind of transient designer to kind of take the snare, just to tame the snare a little bit, because this isn't the kind of thing where you want it to slap. It really isn't that kind of a loop to me. So I'll play you so that was with all the effects. This is kind of just plain, so you can hear a lot more white noise in there from the snare, which I just, it was a little dinky to me. I didn't like it. So. And of course you can hear it glitching out like crazy because of the tape plug-in. So, and I love that kind of stuff. Anyway, let me just check here, see how we're doing. Oakley dokley. Well, Folklies, that's pretty much what I got. I talked about the bus compressing, or the bus processing. I mean, yeah, there's really not. I guess the last part is kind of a bit of an production element, and this again is something that you have to be careful with because you're not the producer, but this is a mixed competition too, and I think they do want to see a little creativity on your part. So with the keys, where we at keys? I have this little bus set up just for the end that starts to sound like a kind of a toy. The idea was like a really trippy, they've had this kind of in and out and in and out vibe to the whole track, and then the last part is obviously out, and it's kind of, fading out, and I almost wanted it to feel kind of surreal. So the piano was something I could take and make sound surreal. Let's see. Oh, why didn't that play, actually? There we go. So that all that's happening there is the original keys is kind of fading out as I'll show you the automation here. The original keys is kind of fading out as the keys that get sent to that weird bus with the kind of warbly stuff on it goes up, which you can see here. Whoop. So that's it. I just thought it was a nice way to end, and give it a little kind of surreal vibe. So that's pretty much it. That's all I got for tonight. Thanks. This is kind of fun. I might do it again. Maybe work on my setup a little bit. But yeah, thanks for tuning in. I hope everybody has a super great night. Yeah, have a good one. All right.